Hi. I wanted to do a video message for a while, and it never seemed like the perfect time or the perfect place, but if you're shooting for perfection, you probably will never do anything. It reminds me of a story I read the other day about the composer Stravinsky. Wrote a new piece and had a very difficult violin solo passage in it, and after a couple weeks of practice, rehearsal, the soloist came to him and said, "This is impossible. No one can play this." Stravinsky replied to him and said, "I understand that." He said, "But the sound I'm looking for is of someone trying to play it." So if you're wanting to do something, the beauty is probably in the trying. So go for it. The message that I want to pass along today is something that I have dealt with, and it's usually what we know the most and are probably the most informed about, is things that we've dealt with ourselves. And the story of love and the idea of it is a complicated one. It has a lot of emotion attached to it, but by and large, it's a choice. And there is different times it seems like the choice is easier to make. When you're upset with someone, it's harder to love them. If you don't agree with them, it's harder to love them. If everything's going rosy and everything's falling perfectly into place and you're in a very romantic place or a place of good will, and then it seems like love is a whole lot easier. Or that emotion, feeling that emotion. But in Jesus' words, when he's asked, what is the greatest commandment? He says, love God with all your heart. He says, and the second is like unto the first, love thy neighbor as thyself. And I've wrestled with that. Even wrestled with loving God, because sometimes when life isn't going so well, you feel forgotten, feel maybe separated and alone. But loving your neighbor, that can be a challenge in itself. But the key to all that is right there in that scripture, in Jesus' words. He says, love God, love your neighbor. He also says to love yourself, because you're going to love your neighbor as yourself. And loving yourself, by and large, a lot of times we've been taught to do anything but love ourselves from a very early age. Struggling for acceptance. You can see kids in their inferiority complex and social anxiety. All that stems from a lack of confidence, and that is really a lack of loving yourself. As parents, I think it's the most important thing that we can do is to raise our kid up loving ourselves. We sometimes feel like that we're going to cause them to be egomaniacs. But in reality, is an egomaniac someone that really loves themselves, or are they just really trying real hard in a very backwards way to love themselves or to get you to love them? Many times they're just feeling for a place, feeling for acceptance, wanting to feel good enough to be loved. And it only can come from within you. Many of us have, I'm saying the vast majority, have looked in the mirror with self-loathing at times. Life hasn't been always good. Life has been a struggle at times. Life has knocked us down. And we look in that mirror and there's one more gray hair, and there's one more wrinkle, and there's one more day of disappointment, and there's one more day dreaded going into a job you hate. All of this comes down to a place of self-loathing and the lack of self-love. The lack of self-love causes you to not feel good enough to make the living that you want to make, and to have the good health that you want to have, and to be able to enjoy the relationship with a significant other, or with your parents, or your siblings, or your children. Self-loathing, it says that hurting people hurt. And I'm sure that we all know people, or we might be people, who have hurt in the past because we were hurting. Self-love is going to change your perception on so many different things. And there's no shortcut. There's no magic wand. There's no switch to flip. It just takes work. It takes reversing what you've done for the last 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, however many years you've been looking in the mirror and been degrading that person and not appreciating that person for who they are. Let me tell you who that person is looking in the mirror. That is the express image of God. It says that we were created in His image and in His likeness. It says that He breathed into us. He inspired into us the breath of life, and we became a living being. He didn't create you to be a doing. He created you to being. If you're trying to do good enough, you never will. But if you're just simply being a being, just being who you are, being who you were created to be, then you can do that. You can do that in perfection. So, my message in a very simple sentence is, start loving yourself today. If you need permission, I'll give it to you. I'm as good as the next guy. Love yourself. When you get up in the morning and you look in that mirror and you have the bed head and you see another gray hair and you got more wrinkles around your eyes and you're just not feeling up to it, you look deep down into those eyes and see that spark of divinity, because it's there. I guarantee it. There is a spark in there that can become a flame. If you'll just nurture it a little bit, you will start appreciating. And in appreciating, you'll start loving. And in loving yourself, you'll start loving God more than you ever have before. You'll become closer. And yes, you will love that neighbor. You'll find it easier in the grocery store to tell that person to just go ahead and go in line. That person at the four-way stop, go ahead. Just go on through. I'm in no rush. You go ahead. And you'll start being loving. When you start being more loving to yourself, you'll start being loving to everybody around. You'll have a better relationship with your spouse. You'll have a better relationship with your kids. You'll see a progress in relationships like you never had before. Perfect love casteth out all fear. It's not going to be perfect if you don't love yourself. God bless you. I hope you have a wonderful day.